Hey friends, welcome back to my garden. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jen. I do cooking, canning, and food preservation videos every Tuesday, and I do vlogs on Friday. If you're into that sort of content, I hope you'll consider sticking around and subscribing. So today we're going to take a little garden tour. This is what we're working with. I was out of town for about 4 days, and things got a little wild here in the garden. But before we take a closer look at what we have going on here, I'm going to show you my garlic bed. Now, a few vlogs ago, you'll remember I said I had a volunteer watermelon in my weed patch. That's what I'm calling this now. Because this bed has been taken over by crabgrass. Well, my daughter pointed out that we actually do have a watermelon now. It's pretty decently sized, and it's totally a volunteer, so I'm just going to leave it and see what happens. Now, when I left, I had a perfectly healthy zucchini plant. 4 days later, I got back to this monstrosity of a mess here. The squash bugs, I have lost the battle to. I was doing a really good job of keeping them picked off every day, keeping the eggs scraped off of the leaves. And when I left, there was actually some zucchini on this plant. And it only took these guys 4 days to just absolutely destroy it. So I'm going to be ripping that out and starting over again. Everything you see in this frame right here is spoon tomato. Now, on the back of the spoon tomato packet, it said that this was a patio variety that could be grown in a pot. I call malarkey. You have to have a really big patio to be growing these on your patio, because that was 2 plants. I have quite a few cucumbers that went way too long. That's okay. We're going to pick them. If they're not bitter, I'm still going to use them. And cucamelons, of course, it's always the cucamelons. You're going to have tons and tons and tons of them if you plant them. I was not prepared. But I'm just going to dig through this mess and get as many of these cucumbers as I can find out. I mean, some of them are really good sized. You can see that my plant are starting to get a little bit of disease, some powdery mildew and stuff like that. But our weather here in Zone 7A here in Western Kentucky is just kind of crazy. We had a heat wave and then it cooled off. And then we had a heat wave again where the real feel was like 110 degrees. And then 2 days later, the high is like 82. So the plants are struggling. The pepper plants, however, are not struggling at all. My banana peppers have put on so many peppers. I have already preserved 5 half pints of pickled banana peppers, and I probably have enough to do 5 more. So they're clearly thriving in this environment. Even though half of these banana peppers were actually supposed to be jalapenos, that's fine. I just purchased my jalapenos from the Mennonite store and made my salsa and things that I needed to make with the jalapenos. So even though, banana peppers, or this amount of banana peppers wasn't what I originally intended, I'm still trying to make good use of them. And, if I get a ton of them jarred up and in the pantry, that just means I won't really have to grow very many next year to pickle and restock the pantry. And if you go back to February when I first started the garden vlogs, when I started my seeds, my banana peppers I purchased as starts from Lowe's, but I started poblanos and jalapenos from seed. Now, like I said, my jalapenos all turned out to be some variety of banana pepper. And my poblanos really haven't done much of anything this year. We had a heat wave pretty early on in the summer, and my pepper plants dropped all of their blossoms. And while the banana peppers, recovered really well, clearly, big basket of banana peppers, the poblanos never really recovered. I harvested one teeny tiny little poblano pepper, and it looks more like a bell pepper. It's deformed really bad. But I noticed a couple of days ago that actually one of the poblano plants has 3 or 4 small ones on it. So I may still yet get a few poblanos off of those plants this season before I give up. The tomatillo has gotten humongous. It has put on another flush of little lanterns, but they're not really filling out. Now, I'm not sure if that's because the temperatures have cooled off or if it's just done and struggling to hang on there. I'm going to give them like another week or two, and if I don't notice any growth in the fruit that's on the plants, I'm going to go ahead and cut them out. My green beans are also pretty much at the end of their life. I am still getting quite a bit of green beans off of it, but I've started to notice rusty beans. Beans with rust. I believe, I'm not really sure, but I think that's a fungus that affects the green bean plants. And once you start to see the rust, it's pretty much done. You can't eat those beans. You can't really preserve them. When you preserve food, you want to use like the best quality produce. You don't want to preserve sickly food. So, um, after this harvest right here, I did get another big harvest, and I'm going to go ahead and tear those out. And you'll see here Mr. Quest, one of the garden kitties. He has just had a catnip break. I found last year some wild catnip growing, and I transplanted it to my garden, and now it's everywhere. So the kitties know when I go to the garden, they're going to get a catnip break. But back to the beans. I gave away a bunch of green beans, and I still managed, I canned like 4 quarts, and I probably have enough to can 4 more quarts. We don't eat green beans that often, but I'm thinking like 8 quarts will be plenty to carry us through the winter. And the okra, as you can see, got pretty big while I was gone. It didn't feel overly woody. I don't know what variety this is, so I have no idea like how big the spears of this okra is supposed to be. These were plants grown from seeds that were gifted to me from someone who lives here in town, and they didn't know what the variety was. So it's just kind of a mystery. But I'm going to cut up this big okra, and if it's not too woody or fibrous, I'm going to go ahead and pickle it. Even if it's so big, I have to cut it in half to get it into a jar. I don't want to waste it. As I said, the first part of the summer was a little crazy with the weather, and then it just kind of continued being crazy. So it's taken the okra a while to really start producing, but it's producing well now. Same for my basil plants. I mean, at one point this summer, I thought these were all going to die, and now I'm just hacking big old pieces of basil off willy-nilly, and they are unaffected. They just grow right back. My chaos tomatoes are still doing okay. These are my tomatoes that I never got trellised up, so I just let them crawl across the ground and do their thing. And, I have lost a couple to, critters nibbling on them, but I have still harvested so many tomatoes off of these plants. I had very little pest pressure in the tomato bed, which I was kind of shocked. No tomato worms. I didn't have army worms. The voles weren't bothering my tomatoes. The birds weren't bothering the tomatoes. In fact, right now I have tomatoes completely lined up down my kitchen counter. So tomatoes were not an issue for me this year. So I'm kind of excited to see what it's going to be like next year when I can actually trellis the tomatoes the way I wanted to originally. And I'm going to grow indeterminates next year instead of determinants. The Super Sweet 100s are doing great. They always do. I'd say if you want a really productive variety of cherry tomato that is nice and sweet, Super Sweet 100s are definitely it. I have probably harvested, I don't know, maybe like 13 quarts of cherry tomatoes, and that's not even counting what I gave away to family and friends and neighbors. But that's all I have for you this week, friends. I just want to remind you that no matter how chaotic your garden might look from the outside looking in, no matter how many weeds you have growing in your garden or how out of control it might look to other people, your garden wants to grow food. Even with this being as messy as it is, I managed to get a very full harvest basket. So until next time, friends, happy gardening.